Hey guys, so let's go over the process of making your crate in Maya and Photoshop. It's going to be a similar setup to the house, right? But we're just going to connect some of those dots, right, that were already connected to us when we looked at the house model. So we already had a texture in that, whereas this time we're going to have to work to create a texture. But we still need that 3D object in Maya to work from, because what's going to happen is we're going to look at the UVs for this object, right, for the crate, and then we're going to export the UV map as a texture using something called UV snapshot. So first of all, we'll just model the crate, and we're going to use the simple method that I used the other day, where we just select all the sides, we click extrude, or we do a Control E to extrude. It will bring up this little dialog box. Make sure your UV editor isn't covering it. I turn off keep faces together, and then I increase the offset ever so slightly, and that'll give me this shape. Now, if I ever want to get out of a tool, I can hit Q, which is just the mouse pointer or the select button. So to get out of extrude in that case, I just hit Q. Control E again to extrude the new face, and then I'm going to push this one in a little bit, or I can use the local translate slide just to get something like this going. Yeah, maybe a little bit less. Cool. Now notice that even though I've made changes to this object, the UV editor was not updated with those changes, right? All these side panels have not been UV unwrapped yet, and they are completely flat, but they're also still connected to everything else around them. So it makes give us a bit of a problem, but it's not too hard to solve. The first thing I'm going to want to do for that is to unwrap these faces and to select them. So selecting objects and finding creative ways to select things quickly is part of the Maya skill set, right? It's almost like, you know, if you need to paint something, maybe you would have a special brush that gives you a texture, right? So you don't have as much time working on the texture. In Maya, you know, we kind of measure our efficiency by the number of clicks that we have to use on something. So in order to select all of these faces, right, I could either go manually and hold Shift and just click one by one, right? Sometimes it is important to do that just to get everything selected, and that was about 10 clicks, right? Another method, a bit faster, that I would think of using is to select the center face and then to grow selection. So I hold Shift and press period twice, and that grows the selection outward from that central face and selects all the other faces around it. Another method I would think of using is sometimes you can drag select to select all the faces. However, by default, the selection tool will also select everything behind that face that is also within your selection box. However, you can get around this by double-clicking on the Select tool. It brings up this new Tool Settings menu, which you can do for any of these tools here on the toolbar. And there's an option here called Camera-Based Selection, which means that only the faces that the camera is pointed at and can see are going to be selected, right? So if I select again, I drag select here, you can see that it did not select any of these faces on the back or the sides. The thing to worry about is sometimes it doesn't catch these vertical faces. It looks like it caught them all right, and sometimes it will catch extra faces, so you might still have to do some cleanup on your selection by using the camera-based selection, but I'll turn that off, or I can hit Reset Tool. Right, gives me the same result there. Now for us, I'm not too worried about the details on the inside edges here, but it would be nice to unwrap those. Typically, for a shape like this, to flatten it out, we're going to need to have either a little bit of stretching along these inside edges here, or we're going to want to disconnect these edges. So the next step would be to actually use a UV unwrap operation here. So I can do UV, I can test out automatic and see what it gives me. See here, it's going to split everything up though. So say I don't really want everything to be split, right? The reason I'm using the UV automatic options is because I want it to do something for me, right? Camera-based or best plane are other options. Camera-based, you will have to be in a viewport that is pointed perpendicularly at all your faces, right? So you can see in the bottom view here, the side view rather, if I have this viewport selected, it has a very, very thin gray outline around this window. And I can go to UV camera based, and then it is just going to flatten things out as the camera sees them, right? Now the issue with this is it has not actually given these guys any physical space on the 2D plane, right? They're still completely flat lines in the UV editor. Now I can get around this by simply squeezing down the central square bit, and that way I can see, you know, if these UVs are unwrapped versus, you know, if I go back, right, they are all stretched, which I don't want. And like I mentioned in class, sometimes you can get away with a bit of stretching if it's in a place where nobody's going to see it, right? If you have, say, a gun and you have some stretching on the inside of the trigger guard, nobody's ever going to be really like looking and being able to see that area, right? So sometimes you can get away with a bit of stretching. Other times you want to be more meticulous. So one method that I could do here is to shrink this central, and then that gives each of these little slats some breathing room. Right, another thing I could do is I could cut the center and move it. Oops. Oh, I need to do an edge selection. Maybe. Sometimes the UV editor is a little bit tricky. So if I cut the center out, right, and look at these guys individually, again, I want to use the checkerboard mode to check where they're stretching. And in this case, right, they're all stretching a bit. I might even want to, you know, if I was really wanted to get rid of that stretching completely, I could select all of these and do an automatic unwrap that would separate them out. Then my option would be to sew or to stitch them back into place like so. Just know that you will get some overlap if you do it just like this, right? Which means that this little texture area will be repeated on those little corners. Might not be visible though if you look close. And I might even want to bring this center bit back in to the middle, right? So I think though what I would typically do though is go with the camera based, so or with a orthographic camera. So again, looking at the side view, UV camera based is going to use this. I could also use best plane. If I click on this, it's going to ask me to select faces that define what plane my selection is on. So here is the plane. If I hit enter, right, it's now using that flat space as the point where the camera will start. And then like before, I'm going to shrink this in slightly. However, this one is too big, so I'm going to shrink it down, and that's my first puzzle piece. So, decision-making time on these, right, is whether or not you want every one of the crate faces to be identical, which in this case, since we're giving it a little bit of personality, I want to have at least one variation on this. So what I'll do is I'll unwrap these other pieces the same way. Alright, select the center face, grow selection by hitting Shift, period, period. Then I can use UV best plane, select that plane, hit enter. It did not do a good job this time. Maybe my selection was off. Oops. There it goes. Must have had an extra thingamabob selected. Alright, then I select the center, drag this inward slightly. And let's say that the top and the bottom and the left and, or the front and the back will be the same, and then maybe I'll make the left and the right slightly different. So instead of just having one area where all of the sides are going to be identical, I'm going to have a second little area just above that, where maybe I'll put like a shipping label on this side or a logo, right? Stark Industries or Jurassic Park or something like that. All right, so next face, click on the center, select. Now, sometimes you can get away with using a copy within the UV unwrap. Let's see if that's gonna cooperate with us today. So if we have a selection of UVs here and we hit paste, sometimes we'll get lucky and it will be able to, to paste those in there, but it doesn't look like it'd be like that. So just do it the other way, select best plane, click the plane, hit enter, then again. Huh. So I guess best plane doesn't always work. It is one of the newer options. Could be that it's not cutting it, possibly. Oops. Oh. Or that I'm in edge mode somewhere. Maybe because I'm in edge mode in the UV. Otherwise, I can look straight at it with the camera and do camera based. That will get me a pretty close result, even though it will be slightly wonky. This one I'm just going to overlay on top of an existing one. Let's see which ones I have left. It's the top view, UV camera based. Okay, so that's the bottom. I'm already mixing myself up. Okay, that's the bottom. So the top and the bottom will be identical. Looks like this is the camera that's perpendicular, so I'll do camera based. And then, what the heck, we've got some space. If we're gonna fit two in there, we might as well make room for one more. And then the last side is this one. And here's camera based. And then that's one of these sides, okay. So it looks like that will be this one. Let's do the opposite side on top of each other. So I'll move this one. You could even do two at the same time though. Let's look at that. So if I wanted to get, say I wanted to have this side and the opposite side be the exact same texture, right? I could select both groups. Right, so they're not on opposite sides. But the camera angle, right, on this side, or this front camera angle is perpendicular to both of these, right? So the camera is going to project all the way through it and grab both sides. If I do, first I middle click inside of this viewport, I go to UV camera based, right? It spits out a single result even though I have two sides selected. Let's grab these middle areas and squeeze them in. And this is our last piece. Let's put it on top of something over here. Get it to be the right size. Alright, then these are going to be our 3 puzzle pieces. So each of these is only going to take up, a quarter of the overall U1, V1. So they do split up the coordinates here into having 0.5, so I'm just going to make it slightly smaller than the 0.5. These two as well, they can come down and live inside of U1, V1. Right? We do want to have them all be approximately the same size though, because that is going to determine how much detail is on them, or the texel density, which is the mix-up of words. Texel density is kind of like, if you've heard of Retina display, right, from iPhone, it's at visual range how many pixels are actually being seen by the camera. So if you have, like, say, a texture with an object that's very large on the texture, right, it has more pixels in it than an object that is smaller, so it is a higher texel density. Now, once we have our layout of some sort, right, it's quite different than the original box layout. Now I want to export this into Photoshop. Now, we could be rough around it and just go and grab, oops, I got Bloodborne characters open for organic modeling. Could just grab a screenshot. It's not very accurate though, right? It's not going to give me pixel perfect results. So rather, inside of the UV editor, I go to the image menu, UV snapshot, brings up a new window as Maya likes to do. I'm going to just put it inside of my Maya folder. Let's just leave it there. And I'm going to use these values for the texture size, 1024 by 1024. So it will spit out a PNG document is what I want. PNG has alpha channel, so it is transparent or see-through. The other thing I sometimes do is I'll just copy the address, Control-C, of where I know that file is going to be. Oh, I'll select the object first. Okay. Hit apply. Spits it out. So this is going to be my texture in a second. This is, oh, I didn't give it a name. So this is my UV layout, and it is pixel perfect, right? So I'm going to put this into Photoshop. And then I'm going to go grab a wood texture from the web, right? So I just went to images on Google, typed in wood texture, and I found this one, which already is quite weathered, but has some nice detail on it, and has cuts on it, which I'm going to want. So I bring that into my document along with my textures. Let's just hide that layer, and I'll put a background in here just so that you can see a little bit clearer what the layout is. Alright, so from here I can start to decide how to lay out the texture on top of the UVs, right? Or to put this into place, I can just scale it, but normally I want to have at least one layer of an unaltered version of this in case I need to go back to it. I'm going to duplicate it once, and then I'm going to rasterize it. I only needed to rasterize because it was a smart object. I like to use smart objects so that you don't lose any pixel quality. So I could just slap down 3 of these. Let's just make a quick one so we can test this out. Okay, drag it into the next UV shell, we call that, and then duplicate it again, and pop it down onto the last one, like so. And then just so that we can tell them apart, let's just put a number on here. 1, 2, 3. Yeah. Now I'll save this file again. Typically I want to save it with a name, but I'll just save it. Here it is also in Maya. I will make it a JPEG because I don't need any transparency. I'll call it crate. Again, this is my path. I sometimes want to copy the file path. Alright, so now I have this image that I want to use as a texture in Maya, right? So I can exit the UV editor, and instead I want to open the Hypershade window, which is the small sphere at the top middle here. I'm going to create a new blend texture, which pops up here inside of the shader graph. And then I'm going to want to bring that crate texture into the Hypershade, and I can do that just by clicking and dragging it in there. And this JPEG option here, right, is the one that I'm looking for. What I just need to do now is connect the out color to the in color on the blend. It shows up in the texture materials, right, and then I need to assign it. Select my object, and I can do assign material to selection. Nothing will change at first until I hit 6 on the keyboard. Now I can see the texture on the crate, right? So once it's up there, I can decide how much editing I want to do, right? What kind of changes I want to make. What I typically like to do on these is to make it look like it's from somewhere specific or going somewhere specific. Another thing to notice is that the numbers are reversed on the sides where I use that trick of selecting, both sides, right? So this is one of the strange things about UVs, is that things can get flipped. Sometimes you want them to be flipped. In this case, I don't really want any text that I put up here as like a shipping label to be flipped. So rather than having to write my text backwards or see it backwards, I'm just going to select those UVs on that face. And I can see it now inside the UV editor. And I go to transform, and just under rotate here, we have flip. So once I click that, it has an instantaneous effect inside here. Do it with this other one. Select those UVs, and then click flip, and it should swap them around. Yeah, so this allows you to put text and things and make sure that your text is going to read in the correct way. All right, so that's usually all we have to do in Maya, unless we're going to make any additional changes in to our UVs, right? We're pretty much just using Maya as our model viewer now. I can go back to Photoshop and start to edit this, right? Sometimes another handy thing to do is to bring the UV snapshot layer onto the top. If it's a PNG, it will be see-through already and will make your life quite easy. Now I can think about things like stylistically, right? Do I want this wood texture to have, oops, where's my copy of the copy? There it is. One thing that irked me or bothered me a little bit was that the, on these cutout bits, these should really be like they are on the side here, with like the wood going vertically, right? It shouldn't be like cut, 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 cut. It is there. So in order to do that, I'm just gonna grab another piece of wood, right? Maybe I'll grab the marquee tool, grab a piece of wood here, copy and paste it. I'm gonna hold shift to snap to angle and rotate it. And then if I pop the wood onto these parts to cover up that area, right? I can drop it there. Just let me grab an eraser and erase the parts that are now in areas that I don't want them to be, right? So in this case, I'm going to erase all of that, some of that. Then I have this wood sideways layer, I'll call it. And I can use it in these other spots as well if I just want to use it all across the board. Let's do one of these. Flip it over, put it down on the bottom as well. Looks like it's gonna fit. Yep, looks okay. Cool, and then still need to do it on this top one. And one more. Alright. Next thing is I want to go back into Maya, right? However, I never want to have the UV snapshot lines showing on my texture. That's something that you must remember to turn off every time, or to hide, right? So let's go ahead and save it as, oh, it was a JPEG file. And to make my life easier, I'm just going to overwrite the existing file. I don't want to have to relink it into the Hypershade. Notice that it does not change automatically when I switch windows. I have to close the Hypershade. When I reopen it, it will refresh that file, and I can see the results. Yeah? So it's looking pretty good. Let's see. So next, what I would typically do is I go back on Google Images, right, and find something maybe that I want to modify the crate with. So I could do, maybe I'll do the one that I normally do, which is a Jurassic Park crate, right? So I'll grab the logo. Let's see if it brings it in correctly. It did not, so I'm going to go to the magic wand, turn on contiguous, and cut it out like this. Then I need to pick a side to put it on. I think this side was my, see, without the numbers on it, now I'm already confusing myself. Then I'm going to change the blending options inside of Photoshop, right? The way I like to do that is just to click on normal here and then to tap down on the mouse until I find the effect that appeals to my eye. So it looks like the color burn or the multiply actually works really well. Right, it still preserves some of that texture underneath, so it makes it look like it was painted on there. Yeah, I can like put a bit of a tilt on it, right, and put it down here. And then I can look for maybe some claw marks. Right, get something like this guy. Copy that, paste it in here, use the magic wand, cut it out, Control D to deselect, and then put some claw marks on the crate in other areas, right? You can again check the normal blend mode and just scroll through it until you find one that looks like it'll work. Right. Oh, this overlay one is working nicely, so I'm getting close to 10 layers, so I like to name my layers once I get a full stack. And then maybe I can like scale some down, right? Okay, save it down as a JPEG again. Pop back into Maya, close the Hypershade, open it back up, and my changes now appear on the crate. Yeah. So with that, we can save it, take a screenshot, send it up on, put it up on Discord, right? If you want to show your texture unwrap as well, that's nice to see always, you know, just to see somebody's thought process and to help your classmates out, right? I think thanks to those of you guys who posted yours already on Thursday and Friday, so that the others could see the process or at least see the results. One other thing that I would like to show you guys with this, when you have a texture like this wood texture, right? Just an extra little tip, is if we've got this texture, right? We've got a UV editor. I left this extra panel in there just for funsies, but it doesn't matter if it's there or not. One thing I might want to do, right, is I might want to have just an extra slat of wood, or I might want to add some more detail to this object in some way, right? So let's say I want like an extra piece of wood. I know some of you guys did the crate version with just round out with kind of the 45-degree angle piece of wood as well. So I can actually add this after the fact and still give it a texture, right? If I put this into place here. Now, usually I'm not a fan of you guys mushing one object into another, right? Because it is inefficient. We've got these faces now inside of the crate, but for demo purposes, it's not a big deal. All right, so let's say I wanted to have this piece of wood just there like that. What I would do is do maybe a quick automatic unwrap just on this piece of wood and check out the UVs. It's not super ideal. So let's grab a camera-based one from this camera. Oh, am I? Why is it coming in perfectly square? That's annoying. Alright, we'll do this a little bit more manually. So I'm going to grab these pieces. I'm going to use the checkerboard in order to check on the stretching here. And I'm going to rotate it. Let's make sure this one is the right direction. Okay, it's the wrong direction. Squeeze, stretch, until I get my checkers as squares. Rotate. So then what I'm going to do, let's just ignore these other pieces for the most part. We'll just pop them over here somewhere. So next what I'm going to do is I'm just going to combine this wood object, or this square object over here, this rectangle, with my crate. So if I click on the crate and I hold shift, I go to mesh, combine. Now, if I look at the UVs, right, the UVs from that crate will now be accessible. Okay, it doesn't look like it assigns it automatically, so let's do an assign. And then face mode. I can drag the UVs on top of the wood part of the texture, and I could use, you know, an existing part. This extra part isn't really necessary for this demo. Alright, and then put these guys also inside somewhere. If I'm not going to see them, it's not a big deal. But this at least gives me an extra piece of wood, right, that I can, maybe I want to use it, I'm going to use it as a face mode to select it, right? Maybe I just want like a little stack of wood next to the crate, right? Maybe some broken wood, like it's been busted a little bit. Or like I mentioned before, I could put it in as part of the crate, right, at this sort of 45-degree angle here. And I have this cross support be a part of it. Now I really messed up my rotations, right, but it's okay. You know, I don't even really need to have it be a part of the same object until the very end, right? I could just assign the texture and then work with it. So, made my life a little bit harder, but it was just a for fun one, so no big deal. Yeah. So experimented a little bit on this, right? It's largely about getting the UV overlay, right? The UV unwrap into Photoshop, but then you can kind of move and place things. So again, to get to that stage, you have your object selected, you go to Image, UV Snapshot, and that will spit your unwrap out into an image file that you can then bring into Photoshop and start to manipulate. So sorry for the delay on that one, but hopefully that helps. Have a good weekend, guys. I'll talk to you on next Wednesday.